It begins not in a boardroom, but in the sweltering, oppressive heat of a Florida swamp in early October 1965. The air was heavy, the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin like a second layer of clothing. And on the practice fields of the University of Florida, players were dropping like flies. They weren't just tired, they were biologically failing. This is where we find Dr. Robert Cade, a nephrologist, a kidney specialist, staring at a clipboard, looking at data that didn't make sense to the average coach, but signaled a medical emergency to him. The assistant coach of the Florida Gators, Dwayne Douglas, had asked Cade a question that would eventually be worth over $20 billion in brand equity. "Doctor, why don't football players wee-wee after a game?" It was a crude question, but it sparked the chemical revolution of the sports world. Cade realized the players were sweating out fluids and electrolytes faster than their bodies could physiologically recover, and plain water simply sat in their stomachs, sloshing around, causing nausea, failing to enter the bloodstream fast enough. So, Cade and his team of researchers went to the lab. They weren't working with a venture capital fund or a massive R&D grant from a pharmaceutical giant. They were working with a budget that would barely buy a dinner for two today. The initial cost to develop the formula that would become Gatorade was approximately $43. That is the seed capital of an empire. $43 to buy glucose, sodium, potassium, phosphate, and lemon juice. When they first mixed it, it didn't taste like the cool blue or lemon lime we know today. It tasted, according to one player, like toilet bowl cleaner. The scientists had created a physiological miracle, a solution that mimicked the chemical composition of human sweat, but they had forgotten the human element, taste. To fix it, Cade's wife suggested adding lemon juice. They did, masking the metallic taste of the electrolytes. They tested it on the freshman team. The results were startling. The players drinking this Gatorade lasted longer. They didn't cramp. In a scrimmage against the varsity team, the freshmen, usually the punching bags, rammed the older players into the ground in the fourth quarter. The business model was born in that moment, though nobody knew it yet. The initial monetization plan was non-existent. Cade wasn't a businessman, he was a scientist. He offered the formula to the University of Florida for free. In one of the greatest financial blunders in academic history, the university officials declined, essentially saying they had no interest in getting into the soft drink business. That rejection forced Cade to look elsewhere, setting up a complex web of ownership that would lead to lawsuits worth millions later on. Cade and his research fellows formed a trust. They approached Stokely Van Camp, a canned food company famous for pork and beans. It was an odd fit, but Stokely saw something the university didn't. In 1967, Stokely Van Camp acquired the rights to produce and distribute Gatorade. The initial deal wasn't a billion-dollar buyout, it was a modest royalty agreement. But as the effectiveness of the drink became undeniable, the money began to flow. The catalyst was the 1967 Orange Bowl. The Florida Gators, fueled by Cade's concoction, beat the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 27-12. The Georgia Tech coach, Bobby Dodd, told reporters, "We didn't have Gatorade. That made the difference." That quote was worth more than $10 million in free advertising. It was the proof of concept that launched the brand from a local experiment to a national necessity. However, the smell of money attracts litigation. Once Gatorade started generating revenue, hitting over $100,000 in royalties quickly, the University of Florida realized their mistake. They sued, claiming that since Cade worked for the university and used their facilities, the invention belonged to them. This led to a bitter 31-month legal battle. In 1973, a settlement was reached that would secure the university's endowment for decades. The agreement granted the university a 20% share of the royalties. To put that in perspective, as of recent years, that 20% stake has yielded the University of Florida more than $281 million in total royalties. The researchers kept the other 80%, making them wealthy beyond the dreams of academic tenure. But the real scaling engine, The machine that turned a $1 million idea into a $1 billion category began in 1983. The Quaker Oats Company, a massive conglomerate known for oatmeal and breakfast cereals, saw the potential of Gatorade not just as a sports drink but as a grocery staple. They acquired Stokely Van Camp for $220 million. At the time, Wall Street scoffed. They thought Quaker overpaid for a portfolio of pork and beans just to get a salty fruit drink. Gatorade was generating about $90 million in annual sales at the time. Quaker Oats, however, had a vision of distribution dominance. Quaker Oats unleashed a growth engine built on aggressive distribution and category creation. Before Gatorade, there was water and there was soda. There was no sports drink aisle in the supermarket. Quaker built that aisle. They utilized their massive leverage with grocery chains to force Gatorade onto shelves. They understood the power of pricing and packaging. They moved from glass bottles to plastic, reducing shipping weights and breakage costs, effectively widening their margins. They introduced the 32-ounce bottle, pushing the idea that hydration wasn't a sip, it was a guzzle. Under Quaker, revenue multiplied from that $90 million base to over $1 billion by the 1990s. The scaling strategy relied heavily on creating a need state. They expanded the target demographic from just elite athletes to anyone who sweated. The weekend warrior, the construction worker, the kid playing t-ball, they all became the target market. They leveraged partnerships, securing deals with the NFL, NBA, and MLB. They didn't just buy ad space, they bought the sidelines. The cups, the coolers, the towels, everything screamed Gatorade. This was a psychological moat. If you were watching the best athletes in the world, you saw them drinking Gatorade. It created a subconscious association. Success equals Gatorade. Then came the competitive advantage that truly solidified their dominance: the science. Quaker created the Gatorade Sports Science Institute in Barrington, Illinois. This wasn't a marketing gimmick, it was a fully functional research facility. They invited scientists from around the world to study hydration and nutrition. By doing this, they validated their product with hard data. When competitors like Powerade, launched by Coca-Cola in 1988, tried to enter the market, Gatorade could point to clinical studies. They owned the efficacy narrative. This scientific backing created a barrier to entry that was almost impossible to breach. You could make a drink that tasted like Gatorade, but you couldn't prove it worked like Gatorade because Gatorade owned labs. The revenue model behind every dollar of Gatorade is a masterclass in high-margin FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. Let's break down the print money system. The primary ingredients of Gatorade are water, sucrose syrup, glucose-fructose syrup, citric acid, natural flavors, salt, sodium citrate, and monopotassium phosphate. The cost of the liquid inside a bottle is negligible, pennies on the dollar. The bulk of the cost is in the packaging, the PET plastic bottle, the cap, the label, and the logistics, shipping heavy water. However, the margins are spectacular. If a 32-ounce bottle retails for $1.50 to $2, the cost of goods sold, including the bottle and liquid, is often estimated to be around 30 cents to 40 cents at scale. The gross margin hovers around 60 to 70%. When you sell billions of bottles a year, that margin translates to enormous free cash flow. The brand also mastered the art of the upsell through segmentation. They introduced the G series: Prime, Perform, and Recover. By breaking hydration into 3 steps, they tripled the potential SKU count per consumer. Instead of buying one bottle for the game, a serious athlete was now encouraged to buy a carbohydrate chew for energy, which cost $2, the drink for the game, which cost $2, and a protein shake for recovery, which cost $3. They effectively turned a $2 transaction into a $7 transaction without finding a new customer, just by extracting more value from the existing one. The 1990s brought the single most important marketing partnership in history, a decision that would define the brand's global identity. In 1991, Gatorade signed Michael Jordan. The deal was originally rumored to be around $1.35 million a year for 10 years, a staggering sum at the time for a beverage endorsement. The campaign, Be Like Mike, wasn't just catchy, it was cultural dynamite. The commercial featured Jordan sweating rainbow-colored sweat, conceptually, and drinking Gatorade. It cemented the idea that Gatorade was the fuel of champions. The return on investment on that $13.5 million contract is incalculable, but it correlates directly with the brand's explosion into a global icon, pushing sales well past the $1.5 billion mark by the mid-90s. But the biggest financial milestone, the tectonic shift in the beverage world, occurred in 2000-2001. Quaker Oats was up for sale. The suitors were the titans of industry, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Danone. Coca-Cola actually had a deal on the table to buy Quaker, and thus Gatorade, for $15.75 billion. It was done. The papers were ready. But at the last minute, Coke's board got cold feet. Warren Buffett, a major